and that says that we're going live. It says that we're live, and I always do a little bit of talking right now because there's a delay in the time, and I also wait for a text message from one of my colleagues to confirm that this is indeed working. But I believe folks are tuned in right now. It's 5:30 to Distance Learning Plus with Mount Tamalpais School. And again, just waiting a minute here to get that text to confirm that we're live, up and running, which I believe we are. And in a second here, I'm going to introduce, or I'm going to hand it off to our student introducer. So we have joining us here in just a second. Again, I apologize for people who are watching and we are live. I haven't gotten that text yet saying that we are. But I'm going to go ahead and have our student, one of our students, third grader J.R. Furtney, introduce our speaker. So J.R., take it away.
Hi, everyone. I am happy to introduce Kip Evans as our guest speaker this evening. Fun fact, Kip and my dad went to high school together.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you for that, JR. And indeed, it was through your dad that we got introduced to Kip. And Kip is a photographer, filmmaker, and marine conservationist and diver. We shared out a film that you have just released, Kip. So Kip, first of all, thank you for joining us. And you do a lot of things. You have a lot of titles associated with what you do. And JR actually asked a question in our Q&A submitted ahead of time. Of all the different kinds of work you do, what job do you like the most?
Wow. I mean, that's pretty easy for me. I love diving more than probably anything that I do in my line of work. And I guess you could say it's the explorer in me that's always looking for, you know, some new species to learn about, or explore a new, you know, reef that I haven't been to, or kelp forest, as you saw in the video, or it might be somewhere really chilly like the Arctic. And so diving has really unlocked so many opportunities, and I really cherish, you know, the time I get to spend underwater. And I think during my career, I probably spent close to 5,000 hours underwater. And it's hard to get tired of diving. There's times where you get, you know, worn down, or it's been a long trip, but you know, it's always exciting, especially when you get in an area with like lots of sharks or other wildlife, where you're always trying to get unique and different shots, you know, and you never get tired of trying to do something better and better each time.
Nice. Toby, also in third grade, asked, at what age did you become so adventurous? And why do you think that age?
Yeah, you know, that's a good question. I grew up in a Navy family. And I started traveling literally the minute I was born. My parents and I lived in Yokosuka, Japan when I was a baby. And then we came back to the United States and stayed there for, I think, 3 years. And then we moved to Taiwan, and I lived in Taiwan for nearly 4 years. And during that time, I explicitly remember riding my bike through jungled areas and rice paddies and exploring. And you know, it was a different time. That was back in the mid 70s. And, you know, I think parents are a little bit more strict with having their kids run around the county. I mean, there were times when I was, you know, a young kid that I would leave in the morning and come back until probably late in the afternoon. And boy, how times have changed. But that's probably the first, you know, kind of early explorer memories. And I love the freedom. When I was a teenager, my dad was very interested in learning how to dive. And so back in 1982, we all took a dive course together in Puerto Rico, ironically. And I fell in love with it. And I spent the greater part of my teen summers on family vacations exploring different dive spots. And I would like to say that, my father really inspired my curiosity for the ocean, and especially for photography. He loved photography. And so, that's what we did for fun as a family.
That's great. As you, so clearly you met Tom in high school, so you went off to high school, and kind of what's the path from elementary school student who is given plenty of room to roam, and then in middle and high school discovers diving? How did you get from there to on a boat in the Arctic making a film as part of a marine conservation effort?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it's not a straight linear road. And like so many of us, it's has a lots of twists and turns. And I want to say that I had it all figured out, when I was 15, and it all worked out perfectly. But honestly, I never even thought about working in the marine science field when I was in high school. And I went to high school in Danville, if Tom hasn't already told you. And there were no marine biology classes. There were no courses even devoted towards learning about the ocean. And I think it wasn't until probably my freshman year in college that I discovered, oh my God, I love the ocean. I want to study and learn as much as I can about it. And so that's what I did during my college career. Is I studied marine biology and environmental studies, and I developed my diving skills. I became, a rescue diver, a scientific diver, and then, a dive master, and then finally an instructor. And I learned about hyperbaric dive medicine and all kinds of amazing things, just because I love the idea of becoming very technically proficient in what I was really interested in. At the same time, I continued to take photographs underwater. And again, I never really dreamed about being an underwater photographer, or being a photographer for that matter, until probably late in my college career, maybe even after I graduated, because I was thinking about getting a real job, and I didn't realize that you could make a living doing what I do today. So from there, I graduated from UC Santa Barbara, and I worked as a air quality analyst, which is someone who does environmental impact reports and figures out how much, like a plane, how much pollution a plane might emit, or how much a car might emit, and I did that for 3 years and realized that it was great to have a full-time job, but I didn't like what I was doing. So I went back to my passion of working in the oceans, and I taught marine education for a long time, and then I worked for the National Marine Sanctuary Program. And then finally in 1997, I got kind of a neat break. I was offered a full-time job to work with National Geographic, exploring the oceans with one-person submersibles that would go 2,000 feet deep. And so that was kind of my first time to be able to work as a photographer and an explorer. And I did that for 5 years. And since then, fast forward to 2020, I've been doing this a very long time now, and I've traveled to every single continent on this planet. And, I've dove in pretty much, every remote corner of the world that you can imagine. And all I can say is that, nothing is really charted. You just have to kind of figure out what your passion is, and you follow that, and just, hopefully the opportunities will slowly come to you with hard work and dedication.
Wow, that's great. And I imagine you've seen all sorts of amazing underlife scenes and flora and fauna. And well, I'd love to hear about what animals look like 2,000 feet under the water. Many of our students watched your most recent film, and some third graders in particular wrote in questions related to that. So I'd love to ask you a few of those. It's Gabriella who asked, what was your favorite animal that you saw while you were in Spitsbergen? Yeah.
Wow. What's amazing about going to a new place where you don't live is that almost all the animals are unique and different. And when I thought about going to the Arctic, I was most excited about seeing a polar bear. And luckily we got to see a mother polar bear and her cub during the trip. I think it was about the third day during the expedition. I'd say that was a highlight, but there was other animals that really grabbed me, by the heartstrings. And the walrus were just so cool, just amazing, just really amazing animals. And I also love the Arctic foxes. The foxes were just so neat, and they run around and they're curious and they're playful. And so the foxes were cool. Of course, the harbor seal that you saw during the movie was a lot of fun. And I've dove with a lot of harbor seals during my career, and they're playful here in Monterey, the Arctic, and Maine and other places. So it's hard to pass up on, throwing some kudos to the harbor seals too. So I can't give you one. I loved them all. But I think that's, just part of, embracing wildlife and embracing what, this wonderful planet has for us. I don't think we necessarily have to choose our favorites because there's so many great ones to love.
That's how I feel about students at school. I don't have a favorite. They all just bring something awesome to the school community. I very related to that. It was Adelia who asked, what does it feel like when the seal nibbles on your fin?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I've had it happen here in Monterey Bay as well. They're curious, and they're just wanting to test, materials, and they're wondering what you are. And so I, have been nibbled on and chewed on by not only harbor seals, but sea lions. And just to regress for a second here, I was diving off of Cape Town in South Africa, and there were these fur seals that I dove with that love to bite your fins, but they would also bite your head and your arms if you weren't careful. And imagine having a dog that's biting pretty hard on your body, and that's what it kind of feels like. It could be really painful. This was very different with this harbor seal. It was more interested in my fins, and I think because they have kind of a rubbery texture to them, so maybe it just felt good to test it out. But typically you don't know until they've got a hold of your fins that they've snuck up on you and grabbed you. So it's always weird. You'll be kind of just kicking along, and all of a sudden you stop and you feel like, I can't move my leg, and then you turn around and there's this big harbor seal that's nibbling on your feet, and it's pretty funny. And then a lot of times you can spin over and they look at you and they test things out, and then they kind of move on and try to get you at a later time.
That's great. And McKenna asked whether you saw any animals on top of the ice, and it sounds like you saw quite a range of animals when you're in the Arctic, both above and below.
Yeah, so above the ice and the water is impressive. And one of the things that most people probably don't think about is the large bird populations in the Arctic. And that's because there's so much nutrients and food for those birds to feed on in the ocean. So you'll see large flocks of both nesting seabirds and seabirds that are just living, in the ocean at the time. As I mentioned, the foxes are great. There's reindeer that you can see, like you might have seen in movies in the Arctic, that are super cool. Of course, the polar bears and boy, those are the main ones that come to my mind right now. But it's cool. The walruses, everything there that you can imagine. And it's unique too, because you can only see these animals, most of them, during their summer months, because obviously it's extremely difficult for those animals to persevere during the Arctic winter. And the same goes for whales and other animals in the ocean. They're migrating to the Arctic during the summer months, where they can access food, that they're interested in using to sustain themselves, or to keep themselves fed, I should say, during that period of the year.
Great. how cold was the water and what's it like under the water, particularly with it being so cold? Those are questions that came from Laura and Isla.
So the water is literally freezing. It's about between 32 and 34 degrees Fahrenheit. So imagine going up to Lake Tahoe and going skiing, and you have to put all your ski clothes on, and it's snowing. That's kind of what it feels like when you're going to go diving. And to keep from freezing, I wear what's called a dry suit, and you saw it in the video. And it's like wearing a really like super insulated plastic bag, if you will, over your body, so no water can touch your skin. And then I wear a hood, and then that goes over my head, except for it exposes part of my face. And so when I'm underwater, I'm dry except for my face, but just kind of imagine being in the coldest freezer you've ever been in, and you just don't, it doesn't matter how much clothing you have on, you're still cold. So it's challenging, but it's so worth it. And when you get underwater, it's just like diving anywhere else. It's still seawater and you still see things on the bottom, but because it's so cold, it just really limits how much your body can take. And there's divers that actually have battery packs with heating pads around their chest and extremities to try to keep warm longer underwater. Or some people that do this for a living, they're called commercial divers, will actually pump warm water through their suit the entire dive. So I didn't have those luxuries. I just had to wear my long underwear and my dry suit.
Wow, amazing. That's great. One of the things that I heard you say is that you spent over 5,000 hours underwater. My guess is, I am very far from being a career-long professional photographer, but I've been a photographer, an amateur photographer at times, and I myself have taken several 100,000 frames. My guess is you've taken millions. That in my own photography, I saw that I got better just by taking so many. Can you talk a little bit about how you're a better photographer, filmmaker, and diver because you've stuck with something so long?
I think, that could be true for just about anything we do in life, right? It just takes a lot of patience and dedication to improve your understanding of what it is you're interested in and your skills, right? And so when I look back at the photographs that I created, in my teens and 20s, there's a few good ones, but by and large, most of them today I would throw away. And I think if you go through life wanting to excel and better yourself and to continue to learn, then as a photographer, as our example here, you will by and large get better. There's kind of an interesting, I don't want to say dichotomy because that's not a third grade class word, but there's an interesting comparison, I guess you could say, between understanding the technical side of photography, like shutter speeds and how a camera reads light, and there's people that do really well at that, and then you have people that are very artistic and they're able to see light and shapes and images that people can't see. And the best photographers are the ones that are the more creative, and then they learn the technical part. And I've known both types during my career. And so if you tend to be, more of the engineer type and less of the creative part, you're going to master how to use a camera, and you're going to get to a point where you can take good pictures, but you're probably never going to reach the pinnacle of creating images that are just, maybe National Geographic quality, and I found that during my career, those types of people tend to be a little more eccentric and different and unusual, and their brains allow them to go to places that maybe, your average Joe just can't go to, or your average Jill, I should say, too. And so anyway, it's interesting in this creative field that I'm in, and I I have recipes that I use, just like you would cook a dinner. I have a recipe that I use to make a good image, and I can go out and I can compose and shoot beautiful images. But during a typical expedition, I might have 25 images that I really like after 10 days, after shooting thousands of images, and I might have 10 that are really, really super good. And I might have 2 that are like amazing. So it's hard, it's really hard. And when you're working in nature, there's no timeline with animals, you have, the only timeline is your limited time. So you have to work with what is given to you by wildlife or Mother Nature, or the ocean. And sometimes it doesn't work out. There's trips we go out on that's too rough to shoot, or it's too murky to dive, or whatever, and you can't get anything done, and it's hard, and it can be frustrating.
That's fascinating for me on so many levels, from the that you get better and that with time and you look back, but you can't just skip that phase. And I also, someone who's spent a lot of time mastering the technical, I have a very close friend who was one of Obama's earliest photographers, who he sees things that I just don't see. And he can just make an image and it's just masterful and beautiful. So really neat to see.
I will say this for your class, and that is, if you want to take great photos of people or wildlife, one of the greatest tips I can give you this evening is eye contact. You always want to try to make eye contact with your subject, and the way you do that is you be patient when you're shooting. You try to get as close as you can without putting yourself in danger, obviously. But when you can connect to the eyes of an animal, it reaches their soul, right? You can make that human connection. It's the same with taking a photograph of a person. So, get down low, get on their level, try to see what they're seeing from where they are. And if you can do those 2 things, you'll have a lot of success.
That's wonderful. My own photography started in sports photography, and it was all about eye contact. That if you can see an athlete's eyes, even if they don't have the ball, if they have that intensity, it just really is beautiful. Timmy asks a question that I really find fascinating. If you weren't diving, what would you be doing with your life?
Wow. Just like probably Tom has days he wishes he was doing something different. I have my days where, I wish I was on the PGA golf tour maybe, or, maybe I would have started a really cool business restoring cars. But, I struggled to give you a great answer because I just don't know. I've spent pretty much my whole entire career doing, what I've been doing in the ocean. So, I don't know. It'd be fun to try something new, and but at the same time, I've been, fairly happy doing what I'm doing.
I totally hear you. If someone told me I could no longer work in schools and education, I'd try lots of things, but I'm not sure what I would do, because that's my greatest source of joy and passion. And there's days that are absolutely frustrating, but it is just so rewarding at the same time.
Yeah.
It's interesting. In our time, you shared that you identified both as being a scientist, and you studied as a scientist, but also as a creative. And I don't think that we always think of scientist and creative as going hand in hand. Can you speak about how you are both a scientist and a creative?
Yeah, so through my formal education, I had to take all the typical classes, the physics and chemistry and biology, and lots and lots of marine biology classes. And they in school they train you to think a certain way, right? And to analyze things in a methodology so that other scientists and people can understand that. And being a creative person doesn't always fit neatly within that. It doesn't fit too well at all. And so it took a long time to realize that I had this creative side to me, because again, in school, I don't think I really ever had an opportunity to explore that. And it wasn't until I started taking pictures that I found that I had kind of a niche for it and that I enjoyed it. And so it took me a long time to develop that. You know, I had some early success and luck, just because I could see things a little differently, like your friend. But where the two have kind of intersected for me, which has been really, really cool, is that I work a lot with scientists. Almost every expedition that we're out on in different places of the world, I'm always working with maybe a shark expert or a whale expert or a coral reef expert. And I'm able to talk with these experts and ask them the right kind of questions and understand what they're doing. And it helps me to better capture how they perceive the world and how to, you know, talk science, how to digest and spit out something people can understand around the world of science. And so that's really powerful when you can do both, right? And it's a fun place to be in, because it's very competitive and hard to be a marine biologist, and it's you know, it's hard to sometimes pay your bills with that job. Not always, but sometimes it can be very difficult. And so I found a way to do something I'm really passionate about, that I love, to be involved with science, but not necessarily do it for a living. So I get to document it and share it with the world.
That's great. Well, it was really inspiring for me to see some of the work that you've documented and really helped me understand a different part of the world. The final question is, you know, our speaker series was initially titled Advice to My Middle School Self, but here we have a wide range of students watching, including some of our elementary school students. Just any last kind of thoughts, tips, advice for our elementary school students and middle school students?
Yeah, you know, absolutely. I think we're a product of our environment, especially a product of our parents, and we tend to stick to those things that our parents are interested in or that we're exposed to through school. And I think while that's good, it can be very limiting. And when I look back, you know, I wish I was exposed to a lot more. You know, I wish I was exposed to more science, and especially marine science. And I know that where you guys are located, you're probably, you know, have a lot of access to nature. So if you love that, you know, take an opportunity to go to the museums and talk with experts, or, you know, talk your parents into taking you on weekends or day trips to just learn and be exposed to totally different things. And it doesn't matter if it's marine science. It could be art. It could be, you know, aircraft, planes. I love airplanes. I wanted to be a fighter pilot, you know, before I ever wanted to do any of this when I was in college. And so I think those things that we dream about and we love, there's a path to it. And I think it's not, like I said, always the straight linear path. It's figuring out how you can overcome some of your own obstacles to get to be where you'd like to be in life. And the only way you can really cherish and realize how valuable or important those things are is to really know what's around you and what other options are available first, so you can, you know, make the right choice in the end.
I love it. It sounds like throughout your life, you are someone who has been interested in various things, and the end result is you are phenomenally interesting to all of us. So thank you for the time that you shared with us. Thank you to the Fertney family and to Tom for connecting us with you. It was really great to see your videos and your work and to share your story with our students. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Andrew, and thanks to the Fertneys as well.
Okay, great. Well, DLP Plus, we have some trivia nights coming up, and that schedule's out there, and we'll look to have some other pieces. But for now, we'll sign off and let everybody go make their dinner. Thanks so much.